Well, thank you so much, guys. I'm really excited to be here and of course, to be a part of the community and, of course, give my insights on what I've learned for the past few years through my journey on building as well as helping some of my customers buy generative AI. Hopefully, my goal with this is to sort of share my experience with you, but also show you guys, some of the use cases as well as some thought process that hopefully you can take back and sort of build it as a part of either your work or projects and things that you're doing together. And hopefully it helps you elevate further. So with that in mind, I'm going to get started. From experience perspective, I've been in the field of AI for the past 10 years. I've worked for both Google and Microsoft, and over 20 years, I've worked for several customers from pharmaceuticals to healthcare to manufacturing, as well as CPG and client products company with Microsoft for over 8 years now. And I have had a chance to see OpenAI, right, come and build from scratch as well as launch to our customers in the private preview. So even before, we went live with general public, we were like working and trying these things with several of our customers so we can understand what are the use cases, the patterns, right, that will be emerging in the industry. And that's what I hope to bring it to you guys here. So with that said, let me just start and level set on something, that I think is very basic. We all know artificial intelligence has been out there for over 100 years. And today my talk is going to focus on what we call as generative AI, right? In terms of scenarios with LLMs and OpenAI that we're seeing. And it is nothing but a very focused area of deep learning, right? So some things that we have done over years. And now we're seeing how this technology is actually accelerating and driving several of the use cases, productivity, for me, and including my son, right, who asks questions on, hey, have you read this book? And can you give me a summary of this book? So I may not have to read it. Like, that's just an example of that. But that's how the growth and adoption that has happened. And I want to bring in a perspective of how enterprises or your customers or you can adopt it for your workplace as well. Since Gen AI had been launched, we saw 4 different use cases pretty much, become very popular with several enterprises. Number one is definitely content generation and summarization. Then, of course, writing codes, right, and search. So let me give an example. For instance, for one of my customers, they do what we call as a due diligence, right? That means they're ready to buy a startup or another company. And while in the process of acquiring, they have to go through hundreds or maybe thousands of documents and contracts and see if there's a risk associated in any of those contracts or understand what's in each of these documents and then get into the details and depth of that document. Now, if we did it without generative AI, it would have taken them a lot of training, development work, right? Without getting the kind of results that we can get with generative AI. With OpenAI as the lead factor in this, we were able to now summarize and help them classify documents and extract information from these contracts and clauses in less than 2 weeks. So we shrink their process from 3 months to 2 weeks, right? And then they can actually go in and deep dive into important aspects of these contracts, right? And have a human like review it, like the important parts that are core to the business, right? That they are doing. So that's an excellent example of an enterprise use case, right? Where, you're going through several of these documents every 3 to 6 months, right? For an acquisition company or a company that's helping you acquire. Another use case is for my own self. For instance, if you guys have heard about Copilot, which is built on these LLMs, right? And OpenAI. Like I had to have a career discussion, right, with the CTO. So when we say OpenAI now, that is great in general, right? For example, if you go to ChatGPT, you can get a lot of information. But what if you had all the information that is stored in your emails, chat, text, right? And the documents that you've created. So I went in and I said, hey, I want to work with Kevin Scott and his org, right? He's our CTO for Microsoft. And I want to become a CTO. Could you give me some insights on, for instance, what is important to Kevin Scott? And it was able to bring me some thought process on where Kevin Scott has been speaking, what he might be working at Microsoft on. And I was able to understand, I was like, this is great. Now, can you like look at my emails, documents, and chats and give me a scenario where if I want to prepare to talk to Kevin Scott, right? What are some of the things and projects that I should be talking about? And it showed me, some of the projects that would be very important and scenarios like that. So that is a day-to-day use of or a differentiation from what you can get directly from ChatGPT versus an enterprise use case where you have these LLMs connected to your data, right? That you live and you talk to each other, right? And things like that. So that's one example. Another example was I said, hey, look at my chat history, like look at my email that I've sent. Can you tell me what are some of the criteria that that stand out in terms of me, how I communicate? Am I communicating collaboratively, for instance, right? Or am I direct? And was able to tell me, oh, great, you're able, here are some options of, where I see you to be able to, talk, and here are some ways you can improve your communication, for instance. So those are some great examples of like a day-to-day use case of summarizing an email or summarizing a meeting recording, right? Things like that that have become very popular. So with that said, I wanted to showcase on what we as Microsoft are seeing in terms of, the adoption. So from the last 6 months, we see a lot of, enterprises, around 75% of the folks, right, are using some kind of, whether it's ChatGPT, whether it's Copilot, whether it's Gemini, or some way of using AI at work, right? And then we're seeing that people are adopting co-pilots, right, from our product perspective, right, as well as where are we seeing, right, Gen AI delivering business value. So there is an entire debate in the industries, like, is Gen AI or AI even delivering value, right? And what we're seeing is the way we're building, the way we're driving, right? It is not only delivering business value, but customers are now embedding AI in their products, right, as it goes to market. So those are some of the things, but I just wanted to then build it. So this is where we are today, but where we might be going, right? And what we see from the industry today is that many of these places, right, and scenarios that we have seen is that instead of our compute, with our compute technology, what we have seen is like, hey, our technology doubles every 2 years, but we're seeing significant changes in the technology, in the LLMs, in the market, like doubling every 6 months, right? So it's like a shorter market. Significant changes are happening every 6 months. And it is definitely something that is challenging, but as well as exciting, right? To keep, just being focused on what's happening today and what's going on tomorrow, right? So it's a lot of learning for somebody like me almost on every day. But this is where we see things changing for, enterprises, right? For instance, universal interface, like multimodality, right? So now we have technology who can see, hear, and talk to us, right? So, of course, then you have memory and context. We have tons of ways that we can store data, and your context and your chat is understood, right, by within that particular windows or framing. And of course, now we have orchestration capability and planning, right? That could drive an action, for instance, from something that you've done. It's like, hey, suggest me XYZ based on this information, and it can actually help you do so. So what are we really building, and where these enterprises are going today is basically building various, agentic world is what we call, right? Whether you're going to see smaller agents within organization, you're going to build your own agents. There will be business processes, cross-organizational agents. So for instance, let's take an example. If you are a exec or a VP, right, at a certain company, and I'm going to say, hey, what are my sales doing, right? I don't really need to go open another app, look at the dashboard and see the graph to know what was my sales yesterday. I should be able to ask a question to an agent and say, hey, can you just brief me on the sales data from this particular report, and it should be able to bring you that data right within the chat. So that's the kind of agents that we're thinking and building, right, for the enterprises and companies that we see today. So from things on simply retrieval of information, sorry about that, to task, and of course, autonomous agents where they're going to go and execute a task based on scenarios. Now, this is something that is continuously being debated, right, and thought through. And but it's out there, right? And as technologists, we all have to be prepared to do it in the right manner. So with the time that we have, I just wanted to go through in terms of what we see in terms of budget allocation, right? Most of the AI budgets have grown over the last year or so, right? From 2023 to 2024, we see a lot of the money from generative AI through budget allocations, right? Company is sort of prioritizing and investing in these things. And what we see is that customers choosing buy and build, right? A lot of questions comes in like, should I be buying something that's already there, or should we be building something on our own, right? That's a question in terms of understanding ROI, in terms of understanding your readiness, right, as a customer on what you can do. And of course, one of the most important factor in this is also what kind of a data you're dealing with, right, for an enterprise. So those are the things, but right now we're seeing almost a 50% split on when a company is either trying to buy something that's already built, or trying to build something because they want to get into the depth of data or customize it, or even like sort of retrain it, right, or fine tune a certain scenario to get into a deeper concept, right? An example could be, for example, law, right? Or a certain aspect of the law where you need to fine tune your already available LLM to a level where it starts giving you responses based on the scenario. A lot of these things where we see customers buying versus building is, again, like what kind of a data becomes key element, right? And what is the kind of IP that you want to drive, right, with the LLMs. So when it comes to IP and the internal data, many customers just choose to sort of either fine tune or build their LLMs versus, using something that's already out there. And what we also see is basically many of the startups, right? This is the time for startups to shine, because we know organizations as big, right? They can't move as fast. But what we started seeing is many of the startups like come up with this, like sort of an in-depth solution or a niche-based solution, where many of these organizations or bigger organizations are partnering, right, with startups to launch their product. Because if startups can scale and build at a much faster rate than a big organization can. So that is another thing that we see a lot of partnerships happening in the space, where big organizations continue to compete with each other to, to drive forward in the Gen AI opportunity. I just wanted to sort of end it here, right? What we do see that for an organization and your readiness, one of the most important thing is organization and culture, right? To be ready to adopt, to be ready to drive, instead of coming from a fear-based mindset. Is it a growth-based mindset? Of course, business strategy. You want to understand like what impact you're driving, right? So have an applied AI. And of course, governance, and responsibility is key in driving value for, for AI. So I know it was a quick 15 minutes. I didn't take a break. I wanted to make sure I run through, but I'm happy to take any other questions with you guys, and feel free to connect to me if I'm not able to answer your question, and I'm happy to respond over LinkedIn if you guys are there too.
I see a question as the Nupur Garg is asking, do we see Copilot getting integrated with all of Microsoft's products?
Yes, and absolutely. I think one of the things that we're trying to do is give you a similar interface, right, to work across all different products, whether it's Excel, whether it's PowerPoint, whether it's, Word. So you're going to see a similar interface come through in Outlook for your email or Teams, right? So all of that will start, all of that, you will see that it's going to start coming through in most of our products as your partner or helper along the way. Perfect. And the next question is, what do you enjoy about the work you're doing since the changes are being accelerated? Yes, yes. One of the things that I definitely struggle with is a lot of keeping up to date. But one of the things that I really enjoy is, we are at the moment in innovation. And if you're driven by innovation, which like literally excites me, I'm always amazed with the kind of use cases and the kind of innovation that we can drive with this, right? Because it has made it so much simpler to do things than what would have taken years to develop and launch with AI. So that is something that definitely amazes me working with it. I do see another question from Raji on how do we prepare best for AI governance? We have to start from start, right? So one of the things we started saying from Microsoft, and hopefully also something that we are trying to send out a message to the community, is that governance cannot come at the end of the project, right? So you need to start by design, right? And it's not just about building something, it's also about resiliency. So, okay, great, you've built something, but how resilient is your system? So continuous monitoring, acting, and building these things, will become key. I definitely suggest, if you want, you can start a center of excellence within your company, which is such a great opportunity for you to land, where you become a promoter of information and governance, right? When you go back to work and say, hey, what are we doing with generative AI? Is there a way for me to create a center of collaboration or excellence where we can actually provide this information proactively? Wow. Okay. Yeah. So another question that I have from Amy is, what common mistakes do enterprises make when selecting AI vendors or solution? This is a really great question and also in depth. Let me see if I can just put it in one of the jobs. I think it's understanding their own readiness, right? So one of the things with AI journey is, a vendor can only come and do so much, right? So absolutely, vet your vendors in the right way, make sure that they have the right capability. I think it's more about the people than what a vendor can do. But I think one of the most important scenario is what would work best for your organizations. That's what we're seeing. Like, have you brought people along? Where are you in the AI journey, right? And what would make most sense for you to start as your first use case? Because you have to bring your people and team along, when you onboard on that journey.